She thought Hollywood would bend over backwards for her. She believed the cameras, the lights, and the velvet ropes would roll out, welcoming her with open arms as if royalty automatically meant authority. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, walked into the studio world carrying a reputation as a global icon, a media darling, and someone with an aura that could command attention. But what she wasn't prepared for was rejection. Not just polite, corporate rejection, but a deliberate, calculated rebuff that would shake her ambitions to the core. And it all started with a simple request. She asked Amazon MGM Studios for free space to produce her own films. Sounds harmless, right? Just a small ask from someone with a powerful brand. But in Hollywood, nothing is ever that simple. Nothing comes free. And in this story, power and fame do not guarantee entry into the inner sanctums of influence. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine stepping into a room, all eyes on you, the world watching, believing that doors are already open. And then, the cold, unblinking gaze of the person in charge stops you. That moment, an ordinary email, a polite brush-off, a whispered refusal, becomes seismic. For Meghan, it was Jennifer Sock, the head of Amazon MGM Studios, the woman with the authority to say yes or no, who became the gatekeeper standing between her and her Hollywood dreams. Sock didn't just say no. According to insiders, she blacklisted Meghan Markle. The word itself carries weight. It is the unspoken sentence that closes doors, stifles ambitions, and whispers to the industry, do not engage. And in Hollywood, where reputation travels faster than a viral headline, that whisper can become a roar that defines careers. But why does this matter now? You may be asking yourself, why is this story relevant? Meghan Markle has faced rejection before, hasn't she? Yes, but this is different. This is about Hollywood power, corporate politics, and the clash of celebrity ambition with institutional authority. Amazon MGM isn't just a studio. It is a fortress of influence, a kingdom where decisions made behind closed doors ripple across the entertainment landscape. And when a figure like Meghan Markle asks for space, not money, not a starring role, just physical space to create, she inadvertently triggers a series of events that reveal much more than the simple refusal. Behind those doors, corporate power struggles, whispered rivalries, and boardroom dramas play out in ways the public rarely sees. And this, my audience, is the moment when ambition meets reality, and reality hits hard. Let's pause and picture it. Meghan sends her request. She's optimistic. She imagines the possibilities, producing films that reflect her vision, telling stories that inspire, working with talented creatives, expanding her brand beyond acting and philanthropy. She imagines a studio buzzing with energy, a production team ready to bring her ideas to life, and herself as the helm of something remarkable. But in Hollywood, optimism is often met with skepticism. The gatekeepers do not bend for charm or celebrity. They bend for strategy, for past successes, for industry credibility. And for Meghan, who despite her fame, is still perceived as a newcomer in the production world, that distinction is critical. It is the difference between walking into opportunity and being turned away with a polite smile. Insiders tell us that Sock's refusal was not just about policy or logistics. It was personal. Some say it was about perception, that Meghan was seen as attempting to shortcut the industry, expecting privileges that hadn't been earned through experience or precedent. Others claim that the blacklisting was a strategic message to the industry. Even someone with global recognition cannot bend the rules for personal gain. The fascinating part of this story is the tension between public perception and private reality. To the outside world, Meghan's request might have seemed minor. To the studio, it was a challenge to their authority, a test of their control. And in that tension lies the heart of this exposé. Now let's talk stakes. Hollywood is unforgiving. Studios like Amazon MGM operate on trust, reputation, and influence. If you are blacklisted, the doors that once seemed open slam shut. Projects are quietly shelved, meetings never scheduled, emails go unanswered. It's a silent form of power, unseen, but deadly effective. And for Meghan Markle, who has already navigated the treacherous waters of media scrutiny, royal expectations, and global fame, This blacklisting represents a confrontation with a system far larger and more intricate than any she has faced before. It is a collision between personal ambition and institutional might, and the consequences ripple far beyond one studio office. But there's more. This is not just a story about a celebrity being refused access. It is a story about strategy, perception, and power. It is about how Meghan Markle, accustomed to being the center of attention, navigates rejection when the rules of engagement are dictated by forces she cannot control. And it is about the woman on the other side of the desk, Jennifer Sock, a figure both revered and feared in Hollywood. Sock's decision is not just a business choice. It is a statement, a declaration of authority. And in Hollywood, statements like that do not go unnoticed. They reverberate through boardrooms, creative agencies, talent managers, and even media outlets. Every whisper becomes a headline, every decision a potential scandal. And the world, as always, watches closely. As we dive deeper into this story, consider this. How does one navigate power when influence alone cannot secure the path forward? Meghan Markle, despite her fame, found herself in uncharted territory. She was not just dealing with rejection. She was confronting the realities of a world that judges based on precedent, not celebrity. And that confrontation would test her patience, her strategy, and perhaps even her public image. Behind closed doors, meetings were held, emails exchanged, and whispers circulated. And each action and reaction built a narrative far more dramatic than any headline could capture. Now, I want you to imagine being in Meghan's shoes. You have a vision. You have influence. You have a global platform. And yet, when you ask for what seems reasonable, you are met with refusal. You are blacklisted. Doors that seemed wide open are closed, and you are forced to reconsider your approach. That moment, my audience, is the crucible of this story. It is where ambition clashes with reality, and where the true drama of Hollywood and Meghan Markle's resilience comes into focus. The tension between expectation and reality, between privilege and authority, is palpable. And it is what sets the stage for everything that follows. And here is the twist that will keep you watching. Meghan did not quietly accept the refusal. She did not back down. Instead, she began a series of moves behind the scenes that were strategic, daring, and, according to insiders, audacious. She tried alternative approaches, leveraged connections, and attempted to circumvent the system that had blocked her. And yet, for every step forward, obstacles loomed. Hollywood insiders whispered. Rivals watched, and the consequences of each move were far-reaching, impacting not just her ambitions, but her reputation in an industry that is notoriously unforgiving. What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What does it take to walk into Hollywood with ambition and walk out victorious? Is fame alone enough? Meghan Markle thought it might be. She imagined the cameras flashing, the executives nodding, and her name printed in every headline as the next big producer to watch. She believed that her combination of global recognition, royal stature, and prior acting experience would grant her instant credibility in the studio system. But in Hollywood, ambition meets reality in ways that can feel brutal, ironic, and, at times, almost comical. Imagine stepping into a sleek conference room, the kind that smells faintly of polished wood, expensive leather, and lingering coffee. There's a long, glossy table with chairs aligned perfectly, laptops open, assistants hovering just outside the door. Meghan is escorted in, radiant, composed, confident. She's not just there for a casual meeting. She's there to pitch her vision, films she intends to produce, stories she wants to tell, narratives she believes are worth investing in. And yet, from the moment she sits down, she can feel it. The air is different. Not hostile, not overtly, but heavy, calculated, judging. She's an outsider. Fame can open doors, yes, but it cannot erase the fine print of industry politics. Let's pause here for a moment. Did you know that many celebrity-led production companies fail not because of talent or vision, but because of industry gatekeeping? Hollywood thrives on networks, reputation, and unspoken codes of conduct. You can be famous, you can have influence, but if you misstep, or even appear to misstep, you risk being sidelined. Meghan, despite her royal status and global recognition, was about to discover just how fragile the illusion of automatic access can be. Her first pitch was ambitious, polished, and meticulously prepared. She had ideas that spanned genres, dramas that tackled social issues, stories about empowerment, films that combined high-profile talent with emerging voices. She envisioned herself not just as a producer, but as a storyteller with influence, someone who could shape culture from behind the camera. Her team had drafted proposals, detailed budgets, and even preliminary concepts for casting. Everything seemed ready. Everything seemed perfect, at least from her perspective. But Hollywood doesn't operate on perception alone. It operates on credibility, past performance, and, most importantly, relationships. And for Meghan, those relationships were thin, untested, and, in the eyes of some executives, overly reliant on fame rather than substance. As she began her pitch, she noticed subtle signs, polite nods that never translated into agreement, supportive phrases that lacked commitment, eyes darting to emails instead of her slides. She felt it, the hesitation, the skepticism. Even as she spoke eloquently, passionately, and persuasively, she could sense that the boardroom was unconsciously measuring her, questioning whether her status as a global figure translated into the competence to run a production studio successfully. Have you ever walked into a room, thought you were prepared for anything, and felt the ground shift beneath you? That was Meghan. The more she tried to assert her authority, the more she realized she was playing a different game. One with rules she had only just begun to understand. Her royal background had taught her diplomacy, charisma, and public relations. Acting had taught her performance, timing, and emotional intelligence. But producing films required something else entirely: navigation of corporate politics, understanding hierarchical influence, and managing egos that dwarfed even her own experiences. Yet Meghan didn't falter. She pushed forward, confident that her vision would speak louder than doubt. She pitched ideas that were bold, unapologetic, and at times risky. Some executives admired her creativity. Others quietly bristled, seeing it as overreach. And here's where contradictions begin. Meghan was simultaneously celebrated for her past achievements and scrutinized for her perceived presumptuousness. Fame had given her entry to the table, but it had not guaranteed respect or influence. Every sentence she spoke, every slide she presented, was being evaluated not just on merit, but through a lens of skepticism. At the same time, her team reported small victories. Nods here, whispered encouragement there. One assistant mentioned that a few of the junior staff were quietly supportive, intrigued by Meghan's ideas and determination. But even this minor encouragement came with a caveat. The senior executives were calculating the risk. They weren't sure if aligning with her ambitions was a strategic win or a public relations headache. And this uncertainty is the heartbeat of Hollywood politics. Perception often outweighs talent, and every decision carries a dual weight of business and image. Let's talk about perception. To the public, Meghan Markle is larger than life, a figure whose every move is scrutinized, every action magnified, every failure dissected. Hollywood insiders, however, see a different picture. An ambitious woman attempting to navigate a space where credibility cannot be bought or inherited, where ambition must be matched with experience, and where missteps, even minor ones, can result in professional isolation. Meghan's challenge was that she was straddling two worlds: the royal-obsessed public sphere and the fiercely competitive corporate studio world. Both expected something different from her, and neither was entirely forgiving. During the initial meetings, tension built incrementally. Not dramatically, not with explosions, but subtly, through unreturned emails, delayed follow-ups, and vague promises. This is where the human element kicks in. Meghan felt frustration, anticipation, and a sense of injustice. She had, after all, built her reputation on resilience, poise, and determination. And yet, the response, or lack thereof, began to chip away at her confidence. It wasn't personal, or so she was told. It was business. But business can feel personal when the stakes are this high, when the doors you expect to open remain stubbornly closed. Now, ask yourself, if you were in Meghan's shoes, would you push harder? Would you adapt, strategize, or retreat? She chose the first option. She decided to pivot, to leverage connections, and to use every tool at her disposal. And in doing so, she revealed something remarkable about human ambition. When faced with barriers, some crumble, while others double down, taking risks that may either lead to triumph or further obstacles. For Meghan, the stakes were magnified. This was not just about career growth. It was about asserting autonomy, influence, and creative vision in an industry where she had little institutional backing. And here's a surprising twist. Despite the mounting resistance, Meghan found pockets of support. Some junior executives admired her audacity. Certain producers, intrigued by the potential media coverage, considered aligning themselves with her. But each supportive gesture was fraught with risk. Associating with someone blacklisted or perceived as a disruptor could jeopardize careers. This is the invisible tension that drives Hollywood gossip and speculation. Alliances are tentative, whispers are powerful, and reputation can swing like a pendulum. Yet Meghan didn't hesitate. She crafted proposals that were sharper, pitches that were more aggressive, and strategies that leveraged every ounce of her visibility. And with each meeting, each email, each phone call, the stakes increased. She was no longer simply requesting access. She was challenging a system, testing boundaries, and daring a powerful executive like Jennifer Salk to either endorse her vision or risk being perceived as dismissive of a global figure. It was audacious. It was risky. And it was bound to create tension that would ripple far beyond a single studio. But here's the question for the audience. Would you have the courage to walk into that room, knowing the outcome could either launch you into unprecedented success or destroy your professional credibility? Meghan did. And as the days turned into weeks, the resistance became palpable. Emails went unanswered for days, meeting requests were delayed, and what little initial enthusiasm existed began to wane. For Meghan, this was a test unlike any she had faced before, a test of resilience, patience, and strategic thinking. And she was about to face a moment that would define her relationship with one of the most powerful executives in Hollywood. The stage was set. Meghan Markle's bold ambition had collided with the realities of studio politics. Doors that seemed wide open were now guarded, and a figure like Jennifer Salk was watching, calculating, and ultimately deciding. Every move Meghan made would be scrutinized, evaluated, and, in some cases, obstructed. Her vision, her fame, and her confidence were all on the line. And just when she thought she had charted a path forward, the first decisive blow came. One that would test not only her ambition, but her very strategy, her resilience, and her understanding of the game she had chosen to play. What happened next would ignite a chain reaction in Hollywood. It would test loyalties, divide opinion, and eventually lead to something that no one could ignore: the blacklisting of Meghan Markle by Amazon MGM Studios. But the story is far from simple, and the repercussions would stretch beyond studio walls, into public perception, media scrutiny, and the very narrative of what it means to be a powerful, ambitious woman navigating Hollywood. And so, the question remains, when ambition meets authority, who wins? Meghan thought she had the answers. But the next chapter of this story would reveal just how complex, calculated, and unforgiving the world of Hollywood power truly is. And the first real crack in her ambitions was about to appear. Who really holds the power in Hollywood? Is it the stars, the agents, the media, or the studios themselves? The answer is simple and terrifying. It's the executives. The people in glass-walled offices, with leather chairs, coffee mugs, and the authority to decide which projects live and which die. And at Amazon MGM Studios, no one commands that authority like Jennifer Salk. If Meghan thought fame, royal status, and a global platform would grant her automatic access to the upper echelons of the studio world, she was about to find out how wrong she was. Salk is not just an executive. She is a gatekeeper, a strategist, and a figure whose decisions can ripple across entire careers. Known for her sharp intuition, unyielding standards, and sometimes ruthless decision-making, Salk has a reputation in Hollywood that is both respected and feared. She has launched projects that defined careers, greenlit films that became cultural phenomena, and quietly shelved countless others. Every action she takes is measured, deliberate, and designed to assert authority. But who is Jennifer Salk beyond the headlines? Born into a world of media and business acumen, Salk rose through the ranks not by celebrity endorsements or royal connections, but but by precision, timing, and an uncanny ability to read the room. She understands power in its rawest form: influence, perception, and control. Every executive meeting, every green light, every veto is not just about business. It's about narrative, image, and long-term legacy. And when Meghan Markle's name appeared on her desk, Sock was not simply seeing a celebrity with ideas. She was seeing someone whose ambitions could disrupt the carefully orchestrated hierarchy of her studio. Let's pause for a moment and consider this. In Hollywood, reputations are currency. You can be talented, charismatic, and globally recognized, but if the gatekeepers don't approve, you are invisible. Sock has built her entire career on understanding this currency. She knows which projects to champion, which stars to nurture, and which ambitions to politely, and sometimes not so politely, shut down. Her reputation is a mixture of awe, caution, and for some, fear. And now, Meghan Markle, accustomed to adulation, attention, and deference, was stepping into a world where none of that mattered. Insiders describe Sock as a strategist first and a mentor second. She watches, she listens, and she calculates. She doesn't act impulsively. She acts with precision. Every rejection, every approval, every nod is a message. And for Meghan, the first indication of the power Sock wielded came in the form of subtle signals. Delayed responses, carefully phrased emails, and the polite yet unmistakable tone of hesitation during meetings. Meghan, who had built her career on navigating royal protocols, media scrutiny, and public attention, found that these were not challenges she could overcome with charm alone. Hollywood, she realized, demanded something else entirely. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Sock's decisions are rarely arbitrary. Behind every refusal is a rationale that balances risk, image, and business strategy. In the case of Meghan Markle, sources say Sock perceived both opportunity and threat. On one hand, Meghan's name carried enormous media weight, a built-in audience, and undeniable star power. On the other hand, her royal background, high visibility, and unconventional approach to production posed potential reputational risk to the studio. This is the paradox of celebrity influence. The same qualities that make someone appealing to the public can make them unpredictable and threatening in a corporate setting. Hollywood insiders whisper that Sock had long admired Meghan's ambition, but she also recognized the challenges of integrating someone like her into an established, hierarchical system. Sock's approach is not personal, it's strategic. She understands that studios operate on leverage, perception, and careful curation of influence. If Meghan succeeds without proving herself in the traditional ways, it could set a precedent that the industry isn't ready to embrace. And that, in Hollywood terms, is dangerous. Consider this scenario. A studio like Amazon MGM has millions of dollars at stake, multiple stakeholders, and a finely tuned system of approvals. Introducing a high-profile celebrity with ambitions to produce their own projects without a track record could disrupt workflows, challenge internal hierarchies, and create ripple effects that the studio cannot control. Sock's refusal to immediately accommodate Meghan wasn't a slight. It was a calculated act to maintain control, uphold protocol, and send a message to the industry. It was about authority, not personality. And yet, to Meghan, it must have felt deeply personal. But here's the contradiction that fuels this story. Sock is also known for nurturing talent. She has a track record of giving chances to individuals who seem unlikely, who outsiders might dismiss, and turning them into box office powerhouses. She understands the gamble, and she knows when to take it. In Meghan's case, however, the risk-reward equation appeared skewed. The gamble wasn't whether Meghan had ideas, it was whether she could navigate the system without destabilizing it. And in a boardroom that balances billions, even minor instability is unacceptable. During those initial interactions, Meghan reportedly tried to leverage her fame, charm, and royal experience to make her case. She outlined visions for socially relevant films, pitched stories she believed could resonate globally, and demonstrated a command of narrative that reflected her acting and public speaking background. And yet, each pitch was met with polite scrutiny, strategic silence, and subtle resistance. It's the kind of pushback that doesn't come with dramatic slamming doors or shouting matches, but instead manifests in ways that slowly erode momentum. delayed approvals, vague feedback, and conversations that never lead to concrete commitments. Imagine being in that position. You are confident, prepared, and convinced of your own vision. You walk into the room, you speak with authority, and you are met with calculated hesitation. Each nod is measured. Each smile is studied. Each promise is conditional. It's subtle. It's frustrating. And for someone like Meghan, who has navigated public life under constant scrutiny, it can feel both infuriating and ironic. Fame does not equal authority, and visibility does not equal credibility. This chapter of Meghan's journey illustrates the stark reality of Hollywood power dynamics. The contrast between celebrity status and institutional authority is vivid. You can be adored by millions and still be powerless in a room where a single executive holds the key to your ambitions. And for Meghan, that executive was Jennifer Sawk. Not a villain, not an adversary in the traditional sense, but the ultimate arbiter of opportunity. Every decision Sawk made, whether to approve, delay, or deny, was a signal, and those signals began to crystallize into what insiders now describe as a de facto blacklisting. Have you ever been so close to opportunity, only to realize the real challenge isn't talent or preparation? It's navigating the invisible rules of a system that doesn't care about your public achievements? That was Meghan's reality. The next steps would test her creativity, her resilience, and her willingness to challenge authority. And while she may have thought this was a temporary obstacle, in Hollywood, decisions like Sawk's carry lasting weight. Once a door is closed, it can be nearly impossible to reopen, and reputations, carefully constructed over years, can be affected in ways that are almost invisible to the public eye. And just when Meghan thought she had found a potential ally within the studio, subtle signals reminded her that Sawk's decisions were absolute. Sources say that internal staffers, curious and supportive as some may have been, quickly understood the stakes. Aligning with Meghan could mean being caught in the crossfire. And for every individual who might have championed her cause, Sawk's authority loomed large. Her word was law. Her approval, or lack thereof, dictated the possibilities available to any ambitious figure. The reality was stark. Meghan Markle's bold Hollywood ambition, while dazzling and visionary on the surface, was colliding with the unyielding, calculating power of Jennifer Sawk. And that collision would set the stage for one of the most dramatic conflicts in recent Hollywood memory, a conflict not just of personalities, but of power, perception, and the unspoken rules of a corporate entertainment empire. What came next would change Meghan's trajectory, test her strategic instincts, and eventually reveal a side of Hollywood that even global celebrities find difficult to navigate. Sawk's decisions were just the beginning. The studio system, the media, the insiders, and the public would all have roles to play in a story of ambition, resistance, and ultimate confrontation. And as the pieces began to move, one question lingered. Could Meghan Markle overcome the unyielding gatekeeper, or was her dream already being quietly dismantled behind closed doors? It began with a simple request. Simple in theory, but explosive in consequence. Meghan Markle, having carefully charted her ambitions in Hollywood, submitted a proposal that, on the surface, seemed reasonable. She wasn't asking for millions in funding. She wasn't demanding creative control over existing franchises. No, her request was straightforward. She wanted free studio space at Amazon MGM to produce her own films. It sounds innocuous, even mundane. But in the context of Hollywood, and particularly under the watchful eyes of executives like Jennifer Sawk, it was a seismic move, a challenge to the established order. Think about it. How often do you hear of a celebrity walking into one of the world's largest studios and asking for resources without offering immediate financial gain or proven track record in production? It's rare. Almost unheard of. And for Meghan, this was a calculated risk. She believed that her fame, public presence, and global influence would suffice. She believed that the mere name Meghan Markle would open doors that had been firmly locked to others. But in Hollywood, as Meghan was about to learn, perception and protocol outweigh celebrity. The proposal, submitted via polished emails and detailed documents, outlined her vision. Stories that highlighted social justice, narratives of empowerment, dramas that tackled contemporary issues, and productions that leveraged both veteran talent and emerging creatives. She presented schedules, budgets, and creative plans. She envisioned a hub where ideas could flourish under her guidance, with the space acting as both a physical and symbolic platform for her entry into Hollywood as a producer. It was ambitious. It was bold. And for many, it should have been enough. But the reality was starkly different. Sources say that Sock, upon receiving the request, paused. Not out of malice, but out of calculation. Providing free studio space is not merely a gesture. It's a financial and strategic commitment. It signals trust, it signals risk tolerance, and it sets precedent. If Meghan Markle, a high-profile yet relatively inexperienced producer, is given space without conditions, what does that mean for other talent? What does that mean for internal hierarchies? In a world where every decision carries potential media scrutiny and financial consequence, this request was a test of authority, influence, and control. And here's where Hollywood's contradictions become painfully clear. Meghan, celebrated for her previous acting career and global visibility, was simultaneously perceived as both highly marketable and dangerously unpredictable. She had public appeal, yes, but she also had history. The royal departure, public controversies, and a reputation for managing her narrative fiercely. From the studio's perspective, offering her free space wasn't just a business decision. It was a gamble on trust, loyalty, and risk management. And in Hollywood, those factors are often as important, if not more so, than talent or vision. The response, when it arrived, was polite but firm. Sources say the language was professional, courteous, and yet unmistakably noncommittal. It was the kind of response that keeps doors technically open while closing them effectively. Meghan's team, initially optimistic, began to realize that the studio's hesitation was more than simple logistics. It was a reflection of the complex dynamics at play. Politeness can mask power, and neutrality can signal control. Sock's reply, while courteous, carried weight. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a statement. The studio dictates terms, and celebrity influence alone cannot override protocol. But Meghan didn't take it lightly. To her, this wasn't just a minor setback. It was a barrier that had to be overcome. She doubled down, reaching out through multiple channels, refining proposals, and highlighting her unique global influence. Her communications emphasized value, collaboration, and creative potential. She pitched alternative arrangements, proposed partnerships with in-house teams, and offered compromises. Every effort reflected her belief in the importance of her vision and her commitment to entering Hollywood on her own terms. Here's where the tension escalates. Hollywood operates on optics, alliances, and subtle power plays. Every email, every meeting, every proposal is scrutinized not only for content, but for perceived intent. Meghan's persistence was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it demonstrated determination, creativity, and strategic thinking. On the other, in the eyes of insiders, it risked being interpreted as overreach, entitlement, or pressure on executives to bend established rules. The line between ambition and audacity is thin, and Meghan was teetering on it. Insiders say that what made the situation even more volatile was the public perception factor. Meghan Markle is not just a celebrity. She is a global figure with a devoted following. Every interaction with the studio had potential media consequences. An internal decision could become a headline. A boardroom hesitation could spark gossip, and a polite refusal could be twisted into scandal. This magnified the stakes exponentially. It wasn't just about free studio space. It was about how the decision would resonate in public perception and how it would affect the studio's carefully curated image. At the same time, internal dynamics were shifting. Staffers, assistants, and junior producers observed the correspondence and meetings. Some were intrigued, some were skeptical, and some were concerned about the potential fallout. Aligning with Meghan could be risky, but ignoring her outright could invite media scrutiny. Every internal conversation, every whispered opinion, became part of the delicate calculus of Hollywood politics. And through it all, Meghan persisted. Her strategy was clear. She would not allow hesitation or politeness to be misinterpreted as denial. Yet the more she pushed, the more the resistance solidified. Sources reveal that Sock and her team began categorizing Meghan as a high-risk, high-profile challenge. someone whose ambitions were bold, but whose approach could potentially disrupt the internal balance of the studio. In Hollywood, risk is calculated meticulously. Ambition must be balanced against hierarchy, workflow, and precedent. And Meghan's request, while visionary in intent, was unprecedented in form. A celebrity asking for free space to independently produce films without traditional studio backing. At this point, it's important to pause and reflect. Have you ever had an idea that seemed perfect in your mind, only to have reality hit in the harshest, most bureaucratic way possible? That is exactly where Meghan found herself. The obstacle was not talent, charisma, or vision, it was power. Corporate power, exercised with precision and deliberate calculation. And the consequences were immediate. Internal hesitation became resistance. Friendly nods became guarded expressions. Minor doubts became reinforced boundaries. The polite refusal had become, for all intents and purposes, the first step in what insiders now describe as a blacklisting. But here's the irony that fuels this drama. Meghan's request, meant to establish her presence and legitimacy, instead highlighted the very barriers she had hoped to overcome. It exposed the rigid structures of studio politics, the influence of senior executives, and the power of perception over ability. It demonstrated that even global recognition and royal status cannot override the unspoken rules of Hollywood. And while Meghan's ambition was bold, audacious, and visionary, it collided headfirst with institutional authority, a collision that would have consequences far beyond a single meeting or email thread. So what did Meghan do next? Did she retreat, concede defeat, or pivot? The answer would set the stage for a confrontation that no one, not even Hollywood insiders, fully anticipated. The quiet tension of polite refusals, delayed responses, and internal calculations was about to erupt into a story that would shake studios, inspire gossip columns, and ultimately define the next phase of Meghan Markle's ambitions in Hollywood. And just as she began planning her next move, the studio made it unmistakably clear. Free space was off the table. Doors that had seemed slightly ajar were now firmly closed. Allies within the studio hesitated. Junior staffers, while supportive, were powerless. And Meghan realized that the person at the center of this decision, Jennifer Salk, was not merely an obstacle. She was the ultimate gatekeeper, a figure whose authority, once exercised, would define the boundaries of possibility in ways Meghan could not yet navigate. The ripple effect was immediate. Meetings that had been casually scheduled were delayed or canceled. Communications that had seemed promising were suddenly vague, non-committal, or absent altogether. And in the background, whispers began to circulate. Rumors about whether Meghan's ambitions were overreaching, whether her public profile was a liability, and whether the studio could risk the potential fallout. It was subtle, yet powerful, and the consequence was clear. What had started as a simple request had escalated into a test of influence, strategy, and resilience. But the story doesn't end there. The refusal, the hesitation, the calculated resistance, all of it, set the stage for a move that would change the trajectory of Meghan Markle's Hollywood ambitions forever. What came next would test not just her determination, but the very nature of celebrity influence, corporate power, and the unspoken rules of one of the most competitive industries in the world. The free space request had shaken the studio. It had revealed the fissures between ambition and authority, and it had signaled the beginning of a conflict that would culminate in something unprecedented, a blacklisting that no one saw coming. Imagine thinking you're on the cusp of something great, only to discover that invisible forces are conspiring against you. That is precisely what happened when whispers in Hollywood became louder and rumors about Meghan Markle began to take a terrifying shape. The story of her ambition, her pitches, and her audacious request for free studio space had traveled faster than anyone anticipated. By the time the first public statements, or rather, leaks, surfaced, the phrase blacklist was already circulating in Hollywood circles. How does a celebrity of Meghan Markle's magnitude get blacklisted? It isn't announced with fanfare. There are no official memos or red stamps on emails. It happens quietly, through unreturned calls, postponed meetings, and strategic hesitations. It happens in whispers in elevators, in private staff meetings, in casual conversations that suddenly get reported by insiders. And once the notion is out, It becomes self-reinforcing. People hesitate to associate, producers shy away, and the network of influence that fuels Hollywood creativity starts to contract. Insiders describe the moment as subtle but unmistakable. What had initially seemed like polite hesitation transformed into a calculated pattern of avoidance. Meghan's emails received no responses. Meetings she requested were delayed indefinitely or canceled at the last minute. Studio executives who had shown interest suddenly became untraceable. For an outsider watching, these moves might seem mundane, but in Hollywood, they are the unmistakable signs of a professional quarantine. The message was clear: engage at your own risk. Let's pause and reflect. You may be wondering, why would Amazon MGM or Jennifer Sock personally take such drastic measures against someone with global fame? The answer is both strategic and political. Sock, known for her exacting standards and calculated leadership, viewed Meghan's audacity as a potential disruption. It wasn't merely about her request for free space. It was about precedent. If a high-profile celebrity is allowed to bypass the traditional vetting processes, what message does that send to others? Hollywood thrives on hierarchy, negotiation, and subtle power dynamics. Allowing exceptions can unravel years of carefully maintained control. At the same time, there were whispers that personal perception played a role. Meghan's profile is unique, globally recognized, historically royal, and extraordinarily media-savvy. Her previous life experiences, public visibility, and assertive personality made her an unpredictable figure. In the controlled, measured world of studio politics, unpredictability is dangerous. Executives like Sock are acutely aware that reputational risk can overshadow potential profit. This is the paradox Meghan faced. Her fame opened doors in the public eye, but simultaneously made her a liability behind closed studio doors. Rumors of her blacklisting began to circulate in industry circles before reaching the public. According to sources, conversations between producers and agents started with cautious phrases. "We've heard about the studio's hesitancy," or "it seems Meghan might be difficult to integrate into current projects." Even those who admired her ambition began to hesitate. Aligning with someone blacklisted, no matter how famous, could damage careers. The subtlety of Hollywood politics is that reputation is everything. Once an executive signals caution, the effect ripples outward like a wave, influencing alliances, negotiations, and even media narratives. Meanwhile, Meghan's team was scrambling. Initial optimism began to wane as they realized that polite refusals and vague communications were not temporary. They were strategic. Sources indicate that Meghan herself recognized the shift, sensing that her efforts to push forward were being systematically curtailed. This was no longer about negotiation or persuasion. This was about power, hierarchy, and control. The term blacklist might not have been spoken openly at first, but the implications were clear to anyone paying attention. Here's a surprising fact. Blacklisting in Hollywood is one of the most effective tools of influence, precisely because it is invisible. It doesn't require public confrontation, lawsuits, or threats. It is executed quietly, often by a single influential executive, and relies on the industry's natural deference to authority. Producers, agents, and other executives instinctively respect signals from those at the top. And when Jennifer Sock subtly moved to limit Meghan's access, she was leveraging decades of influence to enforce an invisible boundary. It was meticulous, it was deliberate, and it was devastating. But Meghan wasn't unaware. She had faced public scrutiny before, navigated media storms, and built a reputation for resilience. Yet, Hollywood operates differently. The walls are opaque, the rules unwritten, and the consequences, immediate yet slow-moving, can feel suffocating. For every door that remained open publicly, multiple doors behind closed doors had already been closed. And as the whispers grew louder, Meghan realized that her audacious bid for creative independence was colliding with a system that valued tradition over fame, hierarchy over celebrity, and cautious control over bold vision. Insiders recount that the blacklisting affected not just access but collaboration. Directors who had considered working with her, producers who were intrigued by her pitch ideas, and talent agents who had discussed possibilities suddenly distanced themselves. The ripple effect was relentless. Hollywood is a network industry, And once hesitation spreads, even indirect relationships start to bend. The message was clear. The industry, led by Sock's influence, had drawn a boundary, and Meghan was outside it. At this stage, Meghan had a choice. Retreat quietly, escalate, or pivot. Retreating would mean conceding defeat, allowing Hollywood's invisible forces to dictate her next moves. Escalating could be risky, potentially further alienating allies and reinforcing the blacklisting. Pivoting would require creativity, strategic networking, and careful navigation of the very forces that were working against her. Sources say Meghan attempted elements of all three, but the effectiveness was mixed. For every tentative success in gaining access or scheduling a meeting, another obstacle would appear. The momentum she had hoped for was slipping through her fingers. And then came the media element. Rumors, as always, were quickly amplified. Gossip columns speculated about her perceived audacity, insiders leaked details about studio reluctance, and social media buzzed with questions and criticisms. Some public figures defended her, others criticized. The collision of celebrity influence and corporate gatekeeping created a spectacle that was as emotionally charged as it was professionally threatening. Meghan found herself navigating not just studio politics, but public perception, a double-edged sword that amplified both opportunities and risks. This blacklisting, while subtle, was extremely effective. It created a scenario in which every move Meghan made was scrutinized, questioned, and potentially undermined. Studios watched, insiders whispered, and collaborators hesitated. The ambitious, confident steps she had taken suddenly seemed small against the immovable weight of an industry resistant to exceptions. And in that environment, determination alone could only carry her so far. So the question arises, when a global figure is quietly blacklisted, what does one do next? Do you push harder, seeking to challenge authority? Do you find alternative avenues, building networks outside the established hierarchy? Or do you retreat, allowing the system to enforce its invisible boundaries? Meghan, sources reveal, was about to discover the consequences of each choice. And each choice carried risk, reward, and a degree of uncertainty that few in Hollywood, and certainly few of her peers, fully understood. What made the situation even more dramatic was that the blacklisting was not public. To the outside world, Meghan Markle was still a powerhouse. Headlines highlighted her fame, her influence, and her royal narrative. No one knew the subtle but powerful resistance she faced behind closed doors. And that invisibility made the struggle all the more insidious. It was the kind of professional obstacle that erodes confidence quietly, isolates strategically, and tests resilience in ways that public challenges cannot. By now, the whispers were no longer just rumors. They were shaping reality. Scheduling conflicts, postponed meetings, and hesitant collaborators were tangible consequences of the studio's strategic distancing. Meghan's vision for independent film production was being systematically obstructed. And while the outside world saw her as successful, in reality, she was being carefully, quietly, and deliberately sidelined. The blacklisting had transformed from rumor to fact. It was real, it was powerful, and it was relentless. But what came next would escalate the conflict to an entirely new level. The combination of public scrutiny, internal hesitation, and executive authority set the stage for a confrontation that no one saw coming. Meghan Markle's next moves would test not only her ambition and creativity, but also her understanding of power, influence, and strategy in Hollywood, a world that can be both dazzling and merciless in equal measure. When the doors of opportunity slam shut, some people retreat. Others, like Meghan Markle, pivot. They search for windows where doors once stood, corridors hidden from public view, and allies who can offer the leverage the system refuses to provide. After facing the polite but firm refusal from Amazon MGM, and sensing the beginnings of an effective blacklisting orchestrated by Jennifer Sock, Meghan realized that conventional approaches would not work. If Hollywood's front door was closed, she would find a back door, or create one herself. This wasn't reckless defiance, it was strategy. Meghan understood one truth that often escapes outsiders. Hollywood isn't just about talent or fame. It's a chessboard of influence, perception, and timing. Every move must consider multiple players: the studios, executives, agents, collaborators, media, and even the public. If miscalculated, a single misstep can collapse months of effort. Meghan's challenge was magnified because she was navigating a dual identity. Globally recognized celebrity and outsider to Hollywood production hierarchies. Her royal background gave her visibility, yes, but it also made her unconventional, unpredictable, and potentially threatening to those accustomed to traditional pathways. So what did Meghan do? First, she identified allies outside the immediate reach of SOC's authority. Sources indicate that she reached out to independent producers, creative directors, and agents with reputations for supporting unconventional projects. Some were intrigued, drawn by the prospect of working with a global figure who could guarantee media attention. Others were cautious, understanding that aligning with someone blacklisted or perceived as a disruptor might risk their own careers. It was a delicate balancing act, build alliances without provoking further institutional resistance. Meghan also refined her pitch strategy. Instead of presenting herself solely as a celebrity seeking resources, she framed her proposals as opportunities for mutually beneficial partnerships. She emphasized narratives that aligned with social relevance, cultural conversations, and untapped audiences. Her approach was strategic, leveraging her global platform as a tool to enhance potential projects, rather than merely seeking personal gain. This pivot demonstrated not only creativity but strategic awareness. Hollywood responds to value propositions framed in ways that balance risk and reward. But the obstacles were relentless. The subtle power of SOC's influence extended far beyond Amazon MGM's immediate walls. Hollywood is a network industry, and even small signals from senior executives can ripple widely. Directors who had expressed interest suddenly became hesitant. Agents who had initially offered advice grew cautious. Collaborative opportunities dwindled. Meghan's audacious pivot, while clever, was met with structural resistance that extended beyond a single office or email thread. She was fighting a system designed to preserve hierarchy, protocol, and predictability. And yet, persistence is part of Meghan's story. Sources reveal that she began leveraging alternative channels, sometimes unconventional. She explored smaller studios, independent production companies, and creative incubators that operated outside the rigid structures of corporate studios. These ventures allowed her to maintain momentum, experiment with projects, and signal to Hollywood insiders that her ambitions could not be easily contained. It was audacious, high-risk, and, according to insiders, calculated. She was learning the rules of a new game in real time, adapting as she went, and refusing to be sidelined. But here's the twist. Every attempt to circumvent MGM came with its own complications. Hollywood thrives on reputation, and blacklisting can influence even independent collaborations. Meghan's name carried attention, but also scrutiny. Potential allies weighed the benefits of visibility against the risks of association with someone who had already triggered institutional resistance. Each meeting, each conversation, each tentative agreement was shadowed by the invisible barrier of SOC's authority. Even outside Amazon MGM, the echo of that power was felt. This is where emotional stakes soared. Meghan, accustomed to navigating public scrutiny and royal protocol, confronted a professional environment where ambiguity ruled. Polite refusals were just as impactful as outright denials. Delays carried more weight than criticism, and reputation, fragile, malleable, and invisible, was both shield and sword. She experienced moments of frustration, isolation, and doubt, but she also displayed resilience, ingenuity, and a willingness to take risks that few outside Hollywood could fully comprehend. One particularly audacious strategy involved discreetly leveraging media narratives to create leverage. Meghan subtly hinted at potential projects, teased collaborations, and used her public visibility to generate interest in the very initiatives that MGM had initially resisted. By doing so, she demonstrated one of the essential truths of Hollywood. Perception often drives opportunity as much as actual resources. If the public believed in her projects, and if independent stakeholders were intrigued, she could exert pressure on institutional players to reconsider. It was a delicate, high-stakes form of negotiation that required finesse, timing, and patience. At the same time, insiders describe her approach as deeply analytical. Meghan did not act impulsively. She gathered intelligence, observed responses, and calculated moves with precision. Every email, every meeting, every partnership was part of a broader strategy to circumvent the studio's resistance while maintaining credibility. It was chess in motion, carefully orchestrated, responsive, and adaptive. And it underscores an essential point. Ambition alone is not enough in Hollywood. Strategy, perception, and the ability to navigate complex networks are equally, if not more, important. Yet, despite these efforts, obstacles persisted. MGM's subtle signals, SOC's influence, and the entrenched hierarchies of Hollywood continued to shape the landscape. Potential collaborators remained cautious. Deals were tentative, and Meghan's efforts, while creative and resourceful, were constrained by forces she could not fully control. The tension was palpable. Every move forward was matched by counterforces that tested her patience, ingenuity, and resilience. Have you ever tried to fight a system that doesn't acknowledge your efforts, where every step forward seems to trigger invisible pushback? That was Meghan's reality. It was frustrating, isolating, and, at times, infuriating. And yet, she refused to back down. She understood that perseverance, coupled with strategic acumen, was essential to breaking through the barriers that SOC's influence had erected. She began experimenting with multi-layered approaches. Partnerships with niche studios, collaborations with independent producers, and media-driven leverage to signal interest without overtly challenging MGM's authority. And here's where it gets truly dramatic. Even as Meghan maneuvered, internal sources report that SOC's team began monitoring these attempts. Every move was tracked, evaluated, and subtly countered. Hollywood insiders describe it as a careful dance. Meghan's audacious initiatives were noticed, yet her influence remained constrained by the studio's gatekeeping mechanisms. The push and pull of ambition and authority created an environment of tension, suspense, and unpredictability, an atmosphere ripe for drama, leaks, and speculation. So what would Meghan do next? Retreat was not an option. The stakes were too high. Push harder risked alienating potential allies. Circumventing the system was fraught with unseen consequences. Each decision was a gamble, each move a calculated risk. And through it all, the shadow of the initial blacklisting loomed large, a constant reminder that even the most audacious strategies could falter against institutional power. But then came a turning point. An unexpected opportunity presented itself, an avenue that had been overlooked, an ally who saw potential, and a pathway that could, if executed correctly, circumvent the very authority that had attempted to stifle her ambitions. This was not just a strategy, it was audacity in motion, and it set the stage for a dramatic confrontation that would reverberate across Hollywood, test loyalties, and ultimately challenge the power of Amazon MGM Studios in ways no one anticipated. What Meghan did next would define not just her projects, but her reputation, influence, and ability to navigate an industry designed to resist disruption. And as the stage was set for this next move, insiders began to whisper. Was she about to outmaneuver one of the most powerful executives in Hollywood? Or was this a calculated gamble that would backfire spectacularly? Hollywood is a kingdom built on whispers. Every conversation, every hallway comment, every lunch meeting has weight. And when news of Meghan Markle's audacious attempts to circumvent Amazon MGM's authority began to spread, the industry reacted immediately. Some were intrigued, some were cautious, and some quietly panicked. Because in Hollywood, when a figure like Meghan challenges protocol, the ripples are unpredictable and wide-reaching. Let's start with the allies. Not all industry players were against her. A handful of independent producers, directors, and even junior executives saw potential. They admired her tenacity, recognized the media attention she brought, and considered the opportunity to be part of a high-profile project a career booster. Some were quietly willing to explore collaborations behind the scenes. But here's the catch. Hollywood is a game of calculated risk. Aligning with someone perceived as being in the crosshairs of a powerful executive like Jennifer Sock could damage one's career. A single wrong move could mean being blacklisted by association. These were smart players. They knew the stakes, and they navigated carefully. Then there were the rivals. Hollywood thrives on competition, jealousy, and power dynamics. Executives, producers, and creatives who felt threatened by Meghan's visibility or worried she might disrupt their carefully laid plans quietly mobilized. Some whispered warnings to others, some leaked cautious insider perspectives to the media, and some simply decided to avoid engagement entirely. The irony is striking. Meghan's fame that opened doors in the public eye closed them behind corporate walls. Every attempt she made to build momentum sparked a mix of admiration and apprehension. And of course, the gossip, the unrelenting, omnipresent, and highly influential gossip, began to circulate. Industry insiders, known for their quiet but pervasive influence, began sharing stories. Meghan is ambitious. She's audacious. She's pushing the boundaries. Some admired her. Some feared her. The effect of these whispers cannot be overstated. In Hollywood, perception is often more powerful than reality. And in Meghan's case, the perception of being difficult, demanding, or overreaching began to spread faster than her actual accomplishments. Consider this. Hollywood operates on relationships. One wrong impression can ripple through multiple layers of the industry. If producers hesitate, directors reconsider, and agents counsel caution, suddenly projects stall. And that's exactly what was happening. Every email Meghan sent, every meeting she scheduled, was being observed.